Today's daf is Pei Vav, and we'll start with the Mishnah on Pei Hey Amid Beis, which is about halfway down the Amud. And we're talking about oil, shemen. That's going to be the subject of today's daf. And the Menachos required shemen blula. It was blula b'shemen. And there are different parts of Eretz Yisrael where they produce the finest shemen. And that has to do with the bracha that was bestowed upon Shevet Asher. Tekoa Alpha L'Shemen. Alpha means Aluf. Aluf is the champion. The champion of oil is in Tekoa. Now, I'm not sure 100% if they know that Tekoa today is the same as the Tekoa of yesteryear, the time of the Mishnah, but certainly it's in that area, which is located in the Chelek of Yehuda. Abashol Omer, Shniala, if let's say you cannot have access to the oil of Tekoa, then second best is a place called Regev, which is located Be'ever Hayarden. Now, what I understood from this, if I'm reading the Mishnah correctly, that even though Ever Hayarden does not have the same exact status as Eretz Yisrael proper, but it is part of Eretz Yisrael. And in Ever Yarden, the best oil comes from Regev. Now we go down to the third level, and that is Kol Harotzos Hayu Ksheros. Elamikan Hayu Mevian. That even though you could bring oil and import it from any country on the face of the globe, but nevertheless, the preferred oil was that of Tekoa, or if not Tekoa, then Regev. Ein Mevian Lomi Beis Hazvolim. Now the Mishnah is going to go on to enumerate those categories of oil which should not be used for menachos, but subdividing that into two subcategories as to whether or not it is disqualified entirely or at least b'di'evid it's kosher. So now we come with a fertilized field, and apparently such oil has the status of mos. It's repulsive because we learned back on Pei Hey Amid Aleph regarding grains for the Shtei Alechem from fertilized fields that we should not be taking those grains. Then we have another category, which is called Beis Hashalchin, which is an irrigated field, and apparently it's a very arid field, and therefore doesn't produce the best grains, as we saw on Daf Pei Hey, nor the best oil. V'lo min mashen nizra beinehem. Now, if you have a field of trees, let's say olive trees, for example, and they plant between the trees, then those plants that are grown between the trees will somehow suck up the nutrients, and therefore those olives that grow on the trees surrounding this area where they did zriya will not be the best quality olives. But vimhevi, b'di'evid, if he brought oil from any of the following, whether it's beis hazvolim, beis hashalchin, or min hanizra shebeinehem, is kosher. However, we have another category of kosher, which is called anpikton. So we'll have to wait patiently to figure out exactly what this oil is. And the Gemara will address that. But now we get to that category, which is the lowest of the low, which is oil that is absolutely and critically disqualified from the menachos. Ein mevim in a gargarin shenishru b'mayim. Now, the gargarin are a certain part of the olive tree or olive branch, and it's called the berries. And they used to take these berries and soak them in water, and then a certain amount of oil would come out and enter into the water, but this is possible. This is not even b'di'evet acceptable. V'lo min hakfushim. They used to take olives, and kavush means to pickle them, and those oils that came out in the pickling process of the olives were not qualified for menachos, v'lo min hashlukim, nor boiled olives. And the Mishnah addresses one of two scenarios, either oil extracted from pickled or boiled olives, or oil that cannot be extracted unless the olives are pickled or boiled. In any event, the oil's on such a low quality level that it's possible. And the Mishnah says, heavy possible. Now we start the Gemara. We already mentioned that Tekoa produced the champion of oils, and the Gemara quotes a pasuk regarding Tekoa. And this pasuk in Nach is in Shmuel Beis, and after the Maisa of Amnon and Tamar, and Absalom the son of David HaMelech killed Amnon to take revenge for his rape of Tamar, and Yoav, who was the Sar Tzava in the brigade of David HaMelech, tried to make peace between David and Absalom, and he enlisted a wise woman from the city of Tekoa. And she would appear before King David as a mourner, draw a parallel between her story and David's treatment of Absalom. Now, the reason why Yoav went to Tekoa in order to find a wise woman is because the oil in Tekoa was of such a superior quality that the people there became wise from the oil. In Tekoa, they use for consumption purposes olive oil, chachma mitzuya bahem. So oil expands the mind. Taner Rabbana, we learned in a brisa, v'tovel b'shemen raglo. This is the bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu bestowed in Vizos HaBracha at the end of the Chumash on Shevet Asher, and he dips his foot in oil. V'zeh chelko shel Asher, shemoshech shemen kemayon. Oil flows like a spring. And now the Gemara presents a whole story, a long story. I'm not exactly sure why the Gemara dedicates so much time to this story. Pam achas nitzruchu lahem lianshe Ludkia. So the people of a town called Ludkia, a Jewish town, had a great need for oil, b'shemen. They ran out of oil. Minu lahem pulmustos echad. They appointed an agent to be their shliach, to go to Tekoa and get back masses amount of oil. This was a non-Jewish person. Amru lo, and they said to him, these are the conditions. Lech, go to Tekoa, v'avei lanu, bring back shemen b'mea ribui. Mea ribui is an amount of mana. A mana is 100 zuz. For 2 zuz, you could buy a goat. So you can imagine it's a large, and you're multiplying it by 100 ribui, which is all told 1,000,000 manas, and bring back whatever large volume of oil you can for 1,000,000 mana. Halach Yerushalayim. First, for some reason, this agent went to Yerushalayim. And apparently he didn't know that the place to go would be Tekoa. Maybe he thought that in Yerushalayim he'd find someone who would point him in the right direction. Amru lo lech litzar. Now, for some reason, the Jerusalemites sent him to Tsar. I don't know why they did that. But anyway, halach litzar. And there again, he asked, where can I get oil? So they responded, Lech legush chalav. Go to a place called Gush Chalav. It's in the territory of Asher, where oil flows like a spring. And that's why the people of Tyre therefore advised the agent to go there. Now, why the residents of Yerushalayim sent him first to Tsur, I don't know. But anyway, Holach legush chalav, and Omru lo, and when he asked around, where can I find someone who can sell me masses amounts of high quality oil? They sent him Amalek Eitzel Ploni L'Sod Elos. Umotzo, he finds the farmer in this oil in this olive grove. Shahaya Ozek Tachas Zesav. In other words, instead of hiring help, workers, he was personally, the Balabais, digging and hoeing under his olive trees. And therefore, this guy who was sent, he got the impression that this Jew is a poor Jew. He's such a poor farmer, he can't afford to hire help. Omar lo, and he turns to the Jewish farmer and he says to him, Yesh la shemen v'mea riboy shani tzarech amru lo hamtein li ad shasayim malachti. I'm busy working here. I'm hoeing and digging under my olive trees. Don't bother me right now. Himton. So, the guy, the shliach, had to do his shlichus. I guess he was paid handsomely, and he had no choice but to wait for him. Ad shasiyim malachto. Liachar shasiyim malachto. Hifshel kelev lachorov. I mean, the farmer didn't even bother to hear, what the request or the order of Shemin would be. How much would they order? And he ties up his tools, threw them over his shoulder, Masakel, and now he continues his work in the field, and he was clearing away the stones, Ubavaderech, on his way home. Amalo. Finally, when he arrived at home, this non-Jewish agent says to him, Yesh lecha shemen b'mea ribuy? Now, at this point, even though he made his request, the guy, the shliach, was talking to himself. He says to himself, Kimedumali ani sheschok sichaku bi hayehudim. The Jews who sent me here, maybe the Jews from Tyre, I don't know, from Tzur, were making a joke out of me. How could it be that they sent me for 1,000,000 manas worth of oil to someone who doesn't even have the money to afford a hired worker? He's so poor. Anyway, Kevan Shehigia Le'iro, so the Jewish farmer reached his destination, and then all of a sudden he has a shivcha, he has a maidservant. So obviously he's not a poor guy. And Hotzia lo shivcha, so kumkum shel chamin. She brought the master, meaning the owner of the farmer of the field, a kettle of hot water. Rochatz bo yodav v'raglov. He's being served now. And he washes his hands and his feet in the hot water. And Hotzia lo sefel shel zahav. Now they take out a golden basin, malei shemen, filled with oil, v'tova bo yodav v'raglov. And why did he do such a thing? And the answer is L'kayim Nemar, because of the bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu had bestowed upon Asher, v'tovel b'shem and raglo. So he saw it as not only a bracha, but also as a skula, perhaps, to bring about an abundancy of oil. Liachar she'achlu v'shasu, it seems that he gave the guy also food and drink, and after they finished, madad lo shemen k'mea ribui. The farmer measures out oil to the tune of 1,000,000 manas worth of oil. And then, out of the goodness of his heart, the farmer turns to the agent and he says to him, Amalo, kluma tatzarch liyoser, do you need a little bit more? Like maybe I can make an extra couple of bucks. Amalo, hey, yes, you know what? Maybe at this point, they only gave me enough money to buy 1,000,000 manas worth of oil, but if you can give me more, I'll pay you back. El Shanli Dom, I don't have the money now, cash on hand. And Omalo, imata rotza likach, you want to take more oil, kach, take, vani elech imach, and I'm going to accompany you back to your mishalchim, vetol domav, and I'll collect the money. Madid lo shem v'shmona saribui. And now the farmer measures out for him 180,000 manas worth of oil. So now he's got, they all told purchased 1.18 million manas of oil. Omer. Now, what what was the demonstration of wealth? Lo hiniach oso ha'ish, lo sus lo perid lo gamav lo chamor be'eretz Yisrael shelo scharo. Apparently, his shluchim, his mishalchim, had to send with him from Ludkia extra money to pay for the transportation of all this oil. There wasn't a horse, a mule, a camel, or a donkey in the land of Israel that wasn't hired to carry back the oil to Ludkia. They reached Ludkia. Yotzu Anshia Ir Lekalso. They went out to praise this shliach for his grand purchase of so much oil. Omer Lahem, he said to him, "Don't praise me, lo li kilsuni el lazeh. You should praise this farmer who came with me. Shemodad li shemen b'mea ribui, bareno shebi b'shmones ribui, and we owe him additional funds to pay for 180,000. Now, is there any moral to the story that we can take out of this story, other than the fact that the oil in Asher was flowing like a stream of water? L'kayim eshenemar, we can learn a moral lesson which is implicit in the words of Shlomo Melech in Mishlei, who says, Yesh misasher v'ein kol, and misroshesh v'hon rav. There are those who are poor as the church mouse, and yet they show themselves as if they're rich. And fakir, on the other extreme, there are those who are very wealthy, and they give you the impression that they're very poor. Why do they give you that impression that they're poor? Maybe they don't want an ayin hara, or maybe they're very stingy. Even rich people could be stingy, so you don't want to take out money to hire help. I don't know. Now, this entire story is told just for this punchline, it seems. And again, for the fact that the best oil, both in quality and quantity, came from Tekoa. But I'm not sure why this lesson of Mishlei is so critical that we have here. How many lines in the Gemara are dedicated to this? Now, I'm going to assume here that Tekoa is somewhere in Gush Chalav. Anyway, let's go on. Ein Mevim, the Mishnah teaches us Lomi base has volume from fertilized fear and also from Anpikanon. What is Anpikanon? And why is that oil invalid? Vatanya, we learned in a brisa, Ein Mevin Anpikoton. Now we start today's daf. V'im hevi posel, invalid. And why is that? Mipnei shehu saraf. It's not really oil. It's just some sort of a secretion. An olive does not produce oil until it's fully ripened. The liquid extract from an unripe olive, which is on pikonin, is not oil at all, but some sort of thin secretion. According to our Mishnah, on pikonin is an invalid oil, but Rashi in the Ksav Yad says it is considered oil, but it's invalid. Amar Rav Yosef lo kasha. On the one hand, we see that it is oil. On the other hand, it's not oil. Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shim bar Rebbe, de Rabbi Chia Zarakle. Rabbi Chia used to throw it out. He didn't consider it worth a dime. It's only a secretion and it's not oil. Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe, metabelbe. He used to dip his food into this oil in order to demonstrate that it really is oil. He also agrees, however, that for Menachos it's possible. Simonech ashirin mekamtzen. Okay, that's a mnemonic device. Okay. Now, what is Shemen Hamor? In Megillas Esther, when the young maidens were being prepared to show up in front of Achashverosh, it says Shisha Chadosh b'Shemen Hamor. My Shemen Hamor. Rav Huna bar Chia Amar Stachta. Balsam oil. Balsam oil. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Omar, Shemen Zayis, it's olive oil, Shalo Hevi Shlish. It hadn't ripened even a third of its process. Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer an Pikanon, Shemen Zayis Shalo Hevi Shlish. So Lama Sachino, so why do people anoint themselves with this thing if it's loy v'yishlish? Shemeshir es haseyar uma'adin es habasar. It's what you call a delipatory that removes hair, and to our surprise, oil produced from unripe olives is potent, and it causes the skin to grow, to glow. It adds a glow to the skin. The Mishnah says, "Ein mevim and agargarin shenishru b'mayim." These are olive berries soaked in water, or pickled, or boiled. Torah Rabbono, we learned in the Brisa Shem and Zayis. Kavush, sholuk, sharui. Whether it's pickled, or it's boiled, or it's soaked in water, v'shal shmarim, or it's made of olive sediments, v'shal reach ra, and if it has a foul odor, lo yavi, v'im hevi posel. Cannot be used. It's totally disqualified, even b'di'evid, for the Menachos. Boy Rabbah. Oh, this boy Rabbah we're going to have a number of times. Hikdisha. You violate a lav in the Torah if you magdish something that's disqualified. So these are the disqualified oils, the cover sholuk and shari and shal shmarim shal reach ra, so forth. And he went ahead and he was magdish. Does he get malchus for that? And why is it? Because if you are magdish a balmum, you get malchus. And I think we mentioned this yesterday. Came in the apostle, kibalmum dami. O dilma ein balmum el b'behema. When the Torah prohibits with a lav and a chiv malchus for consecrating a balmum, it was referring specifically to an animal. And we had this back on Daf Pei Omid Beis. Give me a second, sorry to find it. Yeah, so the Gemara asked that about eitz shenimtza bo tolas, which is possible for the mizbeach, and the Gemara asks hekdish omar sheyilka lo mishum balmum. We also had it with regard to wormy wheat kernels. And it's based on a sugi in Tmura and Daf Vav. The consecration of a blemished animal. Okay. Now we get to the Mishnah here on Daf Pei Vav. Shlosha Zeisimheim. 3 times during the year the olives are harvested. Ubahem Shlosha Shlosha Shmonim. In each one of these 3 harvests, there are different grades, 3 grades of oil that they extract. So the olives are picked at 3 different times during the year. They don't ripen at the same time. Hazayis Harishon, the first harvest of the olives, Megagro Barosh Hazayis. So this is going to be a Machlokes Tanoim, according to the Tanakama. Megagro Barosh Hazayis, he picks the crop at the top of the olive tree, Vekotesh. So keep in mind that word Vekotesh. Which means he pounds the olives with what's called a mortar, and then nosein litoch hasal, he puts them into a basket. That's according to Tanakama. So according to Tanakama, the pounded oil olives are put inside the basket. Rabbi Yudomer, no. Svivos hasal, put the olives around the basket, but not inside the basket, because Rabbi Yehuda maintains that after the olives are pounded, they are packed against the inside of the basket's walls, which will allow the oil to flow down the walls before reaching the basket's perforated bottom and being strained as it seeps through the bottom. The flow down the walls results in a clearer liquid, for the dregs and the froth of the olives are left stuck to the inside walls. Were the pounded olives placed directly at the bottom of the basket, like the Tanakama holds, the oil, says Rabbi Yehuda, would have an opportunity to mix with the sediment before exiting the basket. The result would be a clouded liquid. Anyway, Zeh Harisha, that's the first harvest of oil. Okay, now we're up to the second harvest of oil, and another machlokas shem Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda. Chazer v'toin bakora, he presses the olives with the beam to extract more oil, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. Ba'avonin, don't use a beam, but rather use stones. And Zasheni. Why does Rabbi Yehuda object to using beams and he prefers using stones? So Rashi says that Rabbi Yehuda requires stones for the extraction of oil because a beam is too heavy and would press out olive sediments as well. Now we're up to the third harvest. Chazar v'tochan. I'm sorry, this is not the third harvest, but the third process of the first harvest. Sorry. Chazar v'tochan v'ton. He grinds the olives with millstones, again pressing them with a beam to extract more oil. Zeh hashlishi. This is the third oil of the first harvest. Harisha lemenorah. The first of these 3 is dedicated for the hadlokas hamenorah, the oil for menorah. Vashar lemenachos. So we see that the menorah gets first dibs. And the reason for that is because the pasuk in Shmos Chav Zayin says that for the hadlokas hamenorah you need shemen, zayis, zat, pure olive oil. any subsequent oil might have sediments in it, and it won't be shemen zayzach. However, the remaining grades of oil are nonetheless fit for menachos, because with regard to menachos, we don't have the word zach in the Torah. So both the Tanakhama and Rabbi Yehuda agree that you need shemen zayzach for the menorah. The only question is, how do you obtain it? How do you eliminate all impurity so it be zach? And we have to avoid pressing the olives in a way that the sediments will become mixed up with the oil. The oil must flow from the olives, and then they're placed into a straining basket. Tanakama holds it's enough to place the olives at the bottom of the basket. Rabbi Yehuda requires a greater degree of purity, which is achieved by packing the olives around the inside walls of the basket. And later on, we're going to see how this gradation of three types, what would be its equivalent in the second harvest. Now we're up to the second harvest. Hasheni, Megagro Barosh Hagag. Gag is a rooftop, and Megagro means he picks the crop of the olives at the height of the rooftop. They used to plant olive trees that grew next to roofs. The olives at the rooftop height would be the second group to ripen. So it's not the olives on the top of the olive tree, but it's those olives that reach the level of height of the roof top. The kotesh, again a machlokas here between the Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda. Kotesh, according to Tanakama, pounds v'nosin toch hasal, goes down into the basket. Rabbi Yehuda Omer svivos hasal. Zer rishon, this is the first oil dripping into the basket from the second harvest. Now we have the second oil of the second harvest. Toin Bakora, according to Tanakama, use a beam to extract more of the oil. Rabbi Yudom Bavanim, no, we don't want to use a beam because it's going to get the sediments mixed up there. Zesheni, that's the second. Chazar, now we're up to the third of the second. Chazar v'toan v'tochan v'toan, Zeshlishi Arishon l'menorah, and Hashar l'menachos. So at this point, it would sound like the Rishon of the Rishon and the Rishon of the Sheni are equal. Shlishi, now we're up to the third harvest. Otno bebeis habad ad sheyilke. He packs the crop in a vat until it becomes spoiled. The word otno, he packs it, is related to ma'aton, the vat in which the olives are packed. These olives are not fully ripened. They need to be compacted for several days in a vat until they spoil. Their shells then become soft. And the olives are packed into a vessel for 4 or 5 days. The liquid that seeps out of them is unappealing, and now they have to be dried. Maleu umenagvo, he takes it and dries it, Barosh on top of the roof. Kodesh, again, we're going to have this machlokas of no saying litoch hasal. According to Tanakami, he puts them inside the basket, and svirosal. Zerishon. Then the second of the third harvest is toen bikora, according to the Tanakama, with a beam. Rabbi Yehuda Bavanim, he says no, that's not going to do the job. To make it pure and zach, you need avonim, stones. Zasheni, and finally, the third of the third is chazav v'ton, tochan v'ton. Right, he grinds the millstone with millstones, and the olives with millstones, pressing them with a beam to extract more oil. Zeh shlishi. Oh, now watch this. Harishon limenora vashar limenachos. Even on the third harvest, it seems like the first goes as Shemen Zayisach for the menorah. So therefore, the first of each of the three harvests seems to be equal. Okay. The Gemara now analyzes the Mishnah. We have the following vacillation. Megagro Tnan o Megalgalo Tnan. The beginning of our Mishnah speaks about the top of the olive tree, which is harvested. That's the first of the first. Do we say he picks it or he allows it to ripen? If we say he picks it, that it means he has to choose from the olives that are on the top of the tree which ones are ripe and which ones are not ripe. And he picks here and there to find the ripened ones. But if we go with the second pshat, that megalgalo, it means he's going to leave all the olives on the top of the tree until they fully ripen. Toshma, take a look at this brisa. Shemen Zayis. Now we're talking about what's called an adava of Trumas Halishka, meaning of Kedushas Damim, and he took an adava promise to bring olive oil. Mizeso, the olive, as Rashi interprets it, is so ripe, it's so saturated with oil, then while it's still on the tree, it discharges its oil without having to be pressed. We have an olive tree right here, a few feet from where we are. I never saw this phenomenon where it drips from the olive without any pressing. I never saw it. But that's what it says here, maybe because we're not in Tekoa. Anyway, Mikana Omru, Zayis Rishon Megalgalo. You see where it says Megalgalo? That's the second sad in the original suffix in the base medrash. Berosh Hazayis. So we let the crop ripen on the top of the olive tree until all the olives on the top of the tree are ripe. The konsol base habad, he brings it into the olive press with tochen of rechaim, he grinds it with millstones, v'nosno v'salin, puts it into baskets. And shemen hayotzi mimenu, all the oil that issues from the olive crop at that time, zeh hayarisha, this is the first of the first harvest, and ton bekora, he presses the olive crop with a beam, which means with learning like the Tanakama. And Shemen hayotzi mimenu zeh hayasheni. So again, the first of the first is what drips from the olives without even pressing it. The second of the first has to be subject to the pressing of the olive with a beam. Chazaru porak, he removes the olive from the press, and he still wants to get oil out of it. Tochan vitan, he grinds them with millstones, presses them, and Zel Yashlishi gets a third oil from the first harvest. A rishon lemenorah v'ashar lemenachos v'chein zayis. Now what happens with the third harvest? Zayis Shlishi, in this brisa, Otno bebeis habad sheyilke, he packs the crop in a vat until it becomes spoiled. Malo l'rosh hagag, oso so kamin tomorrow. Tomorrow means a certain shape, which is round and wide at the bottom, but it narrows onto the top. Achio zovu meov, till the fluids flow. And those fluids that flow at this point are unappealing secretions that are generated by the fact that the olives are packed together in the vat. Konsel base of blood. After the olive crop is dried, then he dries them, brings it back into the oil press. Tochen of rechaim, nosna v'salin, v'shemen hayotzi menu. Zelia Rishon, this is the first of the third. So we're really, really getting down to, the last. It reminds me of the story about they had a contest who could squeeze the most juice out of a lemon. And everyone came up, and then there was this one old man, and he said, "Give me a chance." They thought that there was nothing, not even a drop of lemon left in the lemon peel, and he came up and he squeezed and he got another drop out of it. So they said, "Oh, he's a fundraiser." Yeah. Anyway, so Zelia Rishon, that's the first of the third harvest. Now, Ton Bekora, so he presses the olive crop with the beam. Shemen ayotzi v'menu Zelia Sheni. Parak v'chazar v'ton v'ton, ch'tachan v'ton, Zelia Shlishi, Arishon l'menorah v'shal Menachos. Yehuda Omer Loya Tochno Bereichayim, we don't use millstones, Ella Kocho Maseches. We pound it with mortar. Grinding will expel the sediment and clouds the oil. And since grinding creates finer pieces than pounding, therefore grinding releases more sediment. It's a little bit paradoxical here because on the one hand, grinding is better than pounding, but on the other hand, dafka because the grinding is so powerful, it releases more sediments. And Rabbi Yehuda wants to avoid that, and therefore he says, Kocho, he doesn't like using a beam because that also will is too aggressive. It produces too much sediment. Elabavonim and lawyer knows the Vasalin of Tosfivas. Fine. So now the Gemara asks a kasha. Isn't there a contradiction in our Mishnah? Why? Because Kotesh Mani, who is the Tana who advocates Ketisha? As opposed to Tochno Bereichayim is Rabbi Yehudi. And yet, at the end of this brisa, no, at the end of our Mishnah, I should say, it says Toch Hasal. Yeah, but Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that you put it Tzvivos Hasal, Ason Larbonon. So we have a difficulty here. So the Gemara says it's the third Tana. Hi Tana, the Tana of our Mishnah, Sovel Kavose Bechada, accepts Rabbi Yehuda with regard to pounding versus grinding. Upolagalei Bechada, he argues with him and he prefers the bottom of the barrel rather than the sides of the barrel. And that leads us to the Mishnah here on the bottom of Pei Vav. Harisha, now we're talking about, these three harvests, and we're comparing from one harvest to the other. Harishon shebarishon elamalamen. The top is the Rishon shebarishon. Sheni shebarishon. Where does that fit into the picture? It's equal to the Rishon shebasheni. So that means that the Rishon shebasheni does not qualify for the menorah. Hashlishi shebarishon vasheni shebasheni varishon shebashlishi shavin. Okay, fine. The third level of the Rishon, and for that matter, the second level of the second harvest, both of which are disqualified for menorah, they're not Shem and Zach, and they could only be appropriate for Menachos, are equal to the Rishon Shebashlishi. So I don't get it at this point. If you're talking about the Rishon Shebashlishi, so what's the deal with the Sheni Shebashlishi and the Shlishi Shebashlishi? So let's go on in the Mishnah. Hashlishi Shebasheni. Okay, because until now we spoke about the Sheni Shebasheni. Now we're getting to the bottom of the Sheni, that's the Shlishi. And that's equal to the Sheni Shebashlishi. Shabbat. Hashlishi Shebashlishi ain lamata mimenu. That's already the most inferior of all oils. Nothing below it. The Mishnah says, Af kol menachos hayu bidin. Logically, sheyitanu shemen zayis. Let's learn from a Kal Vachomer that if for the menorah the Torah requires shemen zayis, certainly for menachos we should require shemen zayis, because ma menorah sheina al chila. You don't eat the oil of the menorah; it's consumed by the fire, and yet, nevertheless, te'una shemen zayis is menachos shein la chila. Right after you do the kmitza, the rest shirayim are eaten. Is eino din sheyitanu shemen zayis. We certainly should want the finest oil, not like the oil that's consumed on the what you call it in the menorah. Talmud Lomar, for that we need a pasuk. Zayis zach kosis lemaor. The zach, which is the pure oil, is lekosis lemaor. It is pounded for illumination. The ein zay zach lemenachos. The ein zay kosis lemenorah. And that's the end of the Mishnah.